Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Master of Punk's Tamer Sages, the king of the ring himself. It's your boy Thicky Smalls, Gerard Michaels in the house. Well done. Handled well.
That's beautiful.
Welcome back to Gas Digital. It's your boy Thicky Smalls, the funniest man you never heard of, Gerard Michaels, here for another episode of Slick and Thick. And to my right, at 6'3", 200 pounds, and every single one of them is a problem. The master of punks, the tamer of sages, the king of the ring himself, the CEO of the RNC, Pretty Mickey Gall. How are we doing, Mickey?
Well, Big G.
I'm doing great, man. You're standing, back acting up a little bit. We're good, feeling good.
Gotta keep people on their toes. You know what I mean? You never know if I'm gonna be sitting, if I'm gonna be standing. You know, it's for the viewers.
Little stand-up game, little takedown game.
Yeah.
Speaking of the viewers, we have a big guest today.
Hell yeah.
Who's our guest today, Mick?
Man, we are joined by none other. We got a lot of things to read off. He's a former Cleveland police officer.
Cleveland PD.
He's,
Cleveland Suburban.
He's an author.
A best-selling author.
He's the father of our producer.
He's the father of our engineer. He is, and now also as a musician, we've heard incredible
He's a musician.
This is an actual Renaissance man and a friend of the program.
Mafia royalty.
Mafia royalty. He's had his feet on both sides of, this is how, a little pooch just came by the screen there. Well, I got a little ADHD. Sorry, I see a pooch, I got to point it out. Big fan of the pooch. Also big fan of our guest, Rick Porrello. How are we doing, Rick?
Rick Porrello in the house.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Now,
nice to hear that Cleveland accent.
There you go.
For having me.
Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks, Cleveland rocks, Ohio. Now, do you know why they call Cleveland the mistake by the lake?
Well, they don't call it that anymore, but go ahead.
No?
Is it because there's a misspelling?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Look at
Smart.
you
I know
knowing things.
stuff.
He's smart. He knows things. Did you know that it was
From the founder, the
Cleveland?
Yeah.
Cleveland. There was an E that they didn't put into Cleveland. Is that correct?
You're an A, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know that much about it. The biggest mistake is when they kowtowed to the mob and turned the Indians into the Guardians. That's the biggest mistake by the Malakas. That's the mistake by the Malacca is what that is. It's ridiculous. Now, you are someone that's lived, what would you say, 3 lives, 4 lives here?
A few. I've worn a few different hats, you might say, yeah.
Now, the coolest thing, I'm going to get right to it. Christian was like, make sure you bring this up. And I'm like, of course I'm going to bring this up because this is cool as hell. Before we even get to, you wrote a book that turned into an awesome movie. Is it true that you played music with Miles Davis?
No.
Sammy
You're
Davis.
close, though.
What the
You're
hell?
close.
What the hell, Christian?
You're halfway
Sammy
there.
Davis?
Sammy Davis?
You
Yeah,
got it,
some
Mick.
of us have our notes right.
You
Some
got
of
it,
us,
Mickey.
Well, the good thing
some
is
of us are.
this isn't live, so I mean, I could just do it over. But we'll keep it 100% G-real. Sammy Davis?
Sammy Davis
Wow.
Jr., yeah.
That's wild. Was Dino there? Was Dean Martin there?
Occasionally, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra on occasion.
Whoa, you were with the Rat Pack, man?
I was, yeah. I followed in my brother's footsteps. Ray's 9 years older, and he was a drummer, and he worked with Sammy Davis Jr. for 5.5 years. When he left, they auditioned me, and I went on the road with Mr. D for 2.5 years.
You were on the road with
I was.
Sammy Davis Jr.
was.
for 2.5 years?
Wow. Got any crazy stories?
Oh, there's a few here and there, but nothing that comes to mind.
Nothing that comes to mind.
I'm actually working on a memoir. That's my next book.
The next book?
So, yeah, that's the next book.
Oh,
yeah.
so all right, then we can go fuck ourselves. Yeah, if you want to know about it, you can pay $5.99, buddy, like everyone else,
Read
asshole.
the next book, jerk
Yeah,
off.
don't you want to get some pre-orders here? Tell us at least one story, man.
What's the? I'm trying to think of what there is to tell. I mean, I was young. I was only 18.
Yeah, there's definitely no stories, and it has nothing to do with your wife sitting right over there.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. My first audition date, when I got the call, I was in community college. You know, I was interested in police work, but my parents didn't want me to pursue that line of work. So I had a little bit of a fleeting interest in electronics. So I got into community college, but I couldn't handle the math. Electronics is all math. And it was perfect time. My brother was leaving after 5.5 years. He got tired of being on the road, and the music director, George Rhodes, longtime music director for Sammy, called me and basically gave me an audition date in Minneapolis at the Carlton Dinner Theater for a weekend. And I asked him, "Am I going to sit in during a rehearsal?" He said, "No, babe. You got the gig.
No,
for three,
babe.
You got the gig for 3 nights." And after the first show, Sammy called all of his personal musicians. He carried a rhythm section and a trumpeter back to his dressing room, and he came up to me just after the first show. He shook my hand and said, "You're a bitch." Now, back then, what that meant was, you're a bitchin' player. You're a hell of a player, and they liked the way I played the show.
I've tried explaining that to so many women, but it doesn't fly as well nowadays.
You're a bitch, man. You're sure, yeah. So this is around what time?
But no, I meant you're good.
I only because I don't know your
was a
names
compliment.
individually. Like, can't you take a compliment? Jeez, always with the crazy
It's
bros.
old school, I'm a classic.
So you're out there, you're playing the drums. So how did your brother get in with these guys?
He was recommended by a drummer who was a great drummer who was a friend of our family, of my father, who worked with the Musicians Union. He was an officer. Louis Belson, the great Louis Belson. When Sammy needed a drummer, Louis recommended Ray, my brother, to him, and my brother went on the road for 5.5 years and traveled all over. Yeah, and I took over for him.
Did you ever see Don Rickles then? You saw Rickles?
I don't think I ever saw Don Rickles, but we worked with Frank and Dean a few different times.
What was it like working with the chairman of the board?
Well, I mean, when I say we, I mean Sammy worked for him. I was a drummer. I'm off to the side. I was introduced to him from the drum riser down to the conductor, and he waved to me, and I waved to him.
Was there like a weird thing, like you had like stage directions? Don't ever look Mr. Sinatra in the eye, kid.
No, but they did have, they had security, and they both carried bodyguards, and yeah, it was a cool thing, especially for being 18 years old. It was very cool.
So for somebody that writes about the mob a lot, your dad was a union guy with the musicians who knew Sinatra? That seems like a coincidence of sorts.
He was a little on the fringe, you might say, but he was a legit guy. He didn't cross over that line too far, otherwise he would have wound up dead or in prison.
Yeah, and then you became a police officer.
I did.
Because that's what people do after they get done touring with the Rat Pack.
Yeah. Despite that, I passed my psychological testing.
Really? So what made you decide you didn't want to do the music anymore?
Well, I had the interest in police work that was really pulling me. And as a road musician, you're traveling all the time, hotel to hotel, city to city. And I think about 2 years was enough for me. And I worked another half a year. And
was it good money? Was it decent money?
It was. I think I started, now this is 1981. I was 18, and I think I started making $600 a week. And then after a year, my father kept bugging me, "You're there a year, go ask for a raise, you're there." And I finally did. I went to George Rhodes and asked him about a raise, and he said, "Oh, you got to talk to Sammy about that." I'm like, "Oh, great."
Christian, what's $600 in 1981 money in today's money? Is that like $15,000? Like, what's the conversion? What's the conversion on that? And, 2 years rolling with the Rat Pack, and you like that seems like the type of thing like people would wait their whole life to have the opportunity to do that, and for you it was like
for some,
it didn't move you.
Well, it did. I mean, it did for 2.5 years, and I think that's why I've gone back and now I want to write about it. Yeah, a lot of great memories.
It's $2,000 today.
Wow.
2,000. So you were making like $100,000. You were making $100,000 as a drummer.
We worked 30 weeks a year, so you'd have to do the math there. But after a year, I got a $100 raise. I asked Sammy, he was outside his hotel room, and he said, "Yeah, babe, don't worry about it." And about 2 weeks later, I had a $100 raise in my paycheck.
Wow.
Very cool.
How was Sammy as a person?
He was great. A lot of ball busting, a lot of teasing amongst the crowd. They call it starting some shit, and I was the youngest member of the entourage at that point when I came in. And I think sometimes that my father had to talk to Sammy's executive secretary, Shirley Rhodes, who was George Rhodes, the conductor's wife, and maybe ask her to keep an eye on me, because if I was on the ropes, she'd say, "Don't, leave Ricky alone, leave him alone, leave that boy alone, don't mess with him." So I was sort of
does any particular gig stand out as above the others?
We did a benefit for the I think the Palm Desert Hospital in Palm Springs, where Frank Sinatra was from, and that was a star-studded event. I can't remember. Angie Dickinson, the former presidents. I mean, and it was Frank, Sammy, and Dean, and Frank's daughter.
Wait, I have a
Nancy.
question. As a Jersey guy, Frank Sinatra, you said it's Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra's from Hoboken.
Frank Sinatra. Well, he lived. No, where he lived.
Oh, okay. When you say where he's from, I was like, we got to keep Frank Sinatra.
Yeah,
you know
Frank
what I'm
is
saying?
ours.
Us Jersey boys,
Yeah,
you
but-
can't be.
Yeah, but Vegas has him, LA has him, Palm Springs has him.
The world has him now, but you know what I mean.
What I'm happy is that we got the memoir shit out of him. We Jedi mind tricked him.
Good job. Yeah, you did it. Yeah, it's coming. Takes a while to come back. I'm better writing things down, but
That's gonna be
a lot of
awesome.
Good stories.
And you have a penchant for getting your books made into movies.
I've been lucky. I've been fortunate. Yeah.
So I mean, was your dad a hefty looking Irishman? I'd like a role. I mean, that he could play Dino. You got to write these into the writers.
I tried to get in some scenes myself when they were filming Kill the Irishman in Detroit, but they were just blowing things up.
We wanted to know if you were
a lot of
Val
stuff up.
Kilmer.
Yeah,
Was Val Kilmer
so we
based
watched
on
the
you?
movie.
Was he there during?
No. It was the character of Val Kilmer.
Oh, it was
that an
sort of a
amalgamation?
composite character based in part upon the former intelligence officer at Cleveland PD, who had sort of a close relationship, a friendly relationship with Danny Green, but he would have put him in jail if he could. Yeah, but it was a composite law enforcement character. Yeah.
Where did you get your information? What were you doing when the Danny Green stuff was going on? Were you working in the police force at that time?
No, I was only 15 in 1977 when he was killed.
Okay.
So I was a kid when that was going on.
You were 3 years before traveling with Sammy Davis when that stuff was going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's like, if what we read up, and saw the documentaries after we saw the movie, I was unaware all that was happening. That's almost like, late 70s, 80s Dublin, it seemed like. It was like IRA style
all the
bombings.
car
and,
bombings. Yeah.
That was the weapon of choice, bombs.
Yeah.
And what they do is they sometimes put the bomb in they called it a Joe Blow car registered to a fictitious name. They put the bomb in the Joe Blow car, and then the only thing they had to do was get a parking spot next to their target's car, and that's what happened.
That's
with two
that's
guys.
how they ultimately got Danny.
Yeah, that's how they got
with the
Danny
car
Green,
next to
and that's how they got his partner John Nardi a few months earlier.
How?
Oh yeah, that's right. They didn't depict that properly in the movie. It was his own car blown up, I believe.
It could have been
In the movie, at least. I know. I'm sure they took a lot of liberties.
Oh yeah, the movie is the Hollywood version of the story, but it was Vincent D'Onofrio that played John Nardi and
Incredible movie and incredible cast. The
gosh,
late
yeah.
Ray Stevenson, who I love from Rome, as Danny Green, and a very interesting character who you've written about extensively is Shondor Rhimes.
Shonda Burns. Yes,
not Don Rhimes, and that's Christopher Walken's character in Kill the Irishman.
Right.
Now he is kind of like almost a what's his name?
You can say Meyer Lansky.
Yes, like a Meyer Lansky type.
Figured you were going with a crime-ridden Jew.
Yeah, but it's also the way he went about his business, and kind of hiring out the Italians for the muscle, but also running his loan shark and a legitimate business on the side. One of the interesting
I don't
things,
know much about Shondor Burns other than what we saw in the movie.
Yeah, I did a little research. Like, it's crazy. The empire he was kind of, and what I really liked about doing the research on it, and I wonder what your thoughts on this are as well. It's almost like New York 100 years earlier, where it wasn't just the Italians. There was Irish sects, there was a Jewish sect, there was Italian sects, and then the Italians in Cleveland would do business with the Irish in Cleveland to kind of like screw the New York Italians. There was like it was Game of Thronesy in many ways. It was very, I guess it's all the Great Lakes shipping is where all the money was, I would imagine.
Sure, some of it, and also the fact that Cleveland, and this goes back to the 20s and 30s, the position on the map roughly halfway between New York and Chicago. So you had the gangsters way back, passing through, which we kind of see, trafficking of drugs along those major routes.
I remember Cleveland was also a good hub during Prohibition because it was kind of near Canada.
Yes,
You
rum
could
running.
the rum running was big
coming
in
across
Cleveland.
the lake. Yeah.
Now, you heard about this stuff growing up. What made you interested in writing about Shandor, Danny Green, that kind of, did they actually call it the Danny Green War, or was that something that they made in the movie?
It started really because of the murder of my grandfather. That's how I got interested, and that harked back to Prohibition. So that was the first book that I wrote, and I swore, and that was a 9-year labor of love. It took me 3 years to get published.
And that's called The Rise and Fall of the Cleveland Mafia?
Yes, Barricade Books originally. Now I have the rights now, and I'll be republishing it in about a month or so. But that's where my interest came from, and it took me 3 years to get published. And I swore I would never write another book after that. But I was newly married, and when you're commercially published, traditionally published, they send you like hot off the press a case of books. And when I got that book in my hand, I knew I had to do it again. And the most logical next book was about Danny Green, because I wrote a little bit about him at the end of the first book. Yeah, and he was he was almost like in some parts of the population, he was like a folk hero in Cleveland.
Almost like a Robin Hood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It was cool seeing like the real. Like I watched some YouTube stuff after it and saw like him standing out there with his arms crossed doing his interviews. I also saw him blown up with his arm on the street, and the same arm that you see across him is now on the street and stuff. And in the movie, they depict that pretty well, the respect and the admiration he had around Cleveland.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at it sort of loosely and generally, then it's an accurate portrayal.
Was there what parts of the movie versus the real story? Is there anything you'd like to mention like that, or that you liked, or that you did not like, or that you wish they had included?
Well, I'll preface that by saying I'm a local, you might say regional writer. So I was absolutely gassed that this thing got greenlit and it moved forward. It came out. And I credit the original producer, Tommy Reed, who said he was determined to get this thing made into a film and it was going to come out in the big screen. So Tommy did a nice job, and then eventually partnered with Code Entertainment. But, if I had to criticize anything, maybe the number of explosions, it wasn't, they really dramatize that a lot, to make it perhaps more commercially appealing. Some of the other details, the love interests and things like that, where the details may not have been, the actual real story may not have been readily available. But I'm thrilled with it. It's done great. I think it's been on Netflix. It might be on HBO Max now.
It's on HBO Max, yeah, for sure right now. I mean, it is. Look, as an Irish guy myself, you like to have the Irish guy be the anti-hero every now and then. But, there is also that idea of, like, in the movie anyway, Danny Green could do no wrong. The guy knew everything. He was the only bad things ever happened to him was he was a victim of circumstance. And it's like, sometimes these guys know what they're doing, right? These guys know what they're getting into.
The story is glorified. Things get fictionalized, and these guys are sometimes made into romantic heroes. But the truth is, organized crime was really a cancer on society.
So who was the real Danny Green? Who, in your estimation, and now you have a very, very interesting perspective when it comes to this, because you grew up in a mafia family.
Well, I wouldn't quite put it like that. Maybe with a blood history, you might say.
Sure.
But my father was, like I said, he was on the fringes. In fact, when the Vincent D'Onofrio character, John Nardi, was killed, that happened right across from the Musicians Union. So my father and a lot of other people heard the explosion and ran across, and he knew John, because his office was right down the street on Carnegie in Cleveland. So, my father was connected to a lot of these guys because they owned the nightclubs that the musicians played in, or they had influence, or they hung out, they socialized at the nightclubs. Probably the one of the best known in Cleveland is the old Theatrical Grill.
The Theatrical features prominently in the film. But your grandfather, your father's father,
yes,
was a made man.
Well, I don't think they actually had inducted and made men at that point. This was in the 20s. He was an immigrant. He had 6 brothers, so there were 7 Porrello brothers. They came from a town called Licata in Sicily, and eventually got in with the Leonardo brothers, who were their friends in Sicily, and basically got a lock on the wholesaling of corn sugar, which was used to make corn liquor, which, from what I understand, which I learned is kind of a chemical cousin to bourbon, I believe. And it was a popular
Rain
thing
makes
then.
corn makes whiskey, and whiskey makes your baby feel a little frisky.
Thank you.
Anything else you guys need, let me know. So your grandfather if you don't want to call him mafia, that's fine.
No, he was definitely mafia, but I don't know that they had made. I'm just trying to be
Sure.
accurate.
No,
They actually had
absolutely.
made- But yeah, they were essentially the second mafia family in Cleveland.
Interesting. And then your father was on the fringes, but wasn't in. And then you, 2 generations away, not only become a police officer, you become captain of police.
I was the police
Chief
chief
of police.
for just over 10 years. Yeah.
Your family is
In a Cleveland suburb, not Cleveland. Yeah.
Your family's prone to leadership positions, it would appear, right? Like you're in positions of leadership. Did your father have anything to do with the formation of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? That was the musicians union that did that, wasn't it?
I think that came later after he was out.
After he was out.
So I'm interested in your great grandfather. So
My paternal grandfather.
Your grandfather, Christian.
This guy's
Christian's great grandfather. So your father, he passed when your father was 6 or 7. You said
5 or 6. Yeah, I think 6
okay.
years old.
What happened there? So he started with I'm interested in his life. So he came over here. He got hooked up with the corn what was it? You said the corn sugar.
Yeah.
The corn sugar, which then they were using the bootleg.
Yep.
And like we mentioned before, Cleveland was a good spot for bootlegging, also just for bringing stuff in from Canada, right? Because it was across the Great Lake.
Yes.
So where did he meet his demise? How did he?
So basically, they were partnered with the Leonardo brothers. There were 7 Porrello brothers, 4 Leonardo brothers, all from Sicily. And they worked together for a time. And then in 1927, the story, as I believe, is that a business manager who worked at one time or another with both of them engineered the murder of the 2 top Leonardo brothers. And that was the beginning of what is known as the Sugar War. And then bodies, continued to fall. First, my uncle, great uncle, Uncle Joe, and then Uncle Jim were killed in 1930, a few months apart. And then in 1932, my grandfather, Raymond, who was the youngest of the brothers, and his brother, Rosario, who was the oldest of the brothers, and their bodyguard, were killed while they were playing cards.
Wow.
Who do you think did it?
Probably the Mayfield Road mob, who was becoming like the mafia family, the more powerful, more
like a power
politically
vacuum
connected. Power change, a secession of power, you might say. And then pretty soon they exerted the most influence as far as a mafia family or organized crime family.
What made the city of Cleveland so susceptible to organized crime, do you think? All the way up to the 80s, really?
Yeah, well, it was a big city. I mean, if you look at a lot of people think that the mafia or La Cosa Nostra, they think Chicago, New York, and maybe Las Vegas. But if you
New Orleans,
New Orleans, Philadelphia. But if you look at the real history, there was probably, depending on how you count, anywhere from 22 to 26 crime families, mafia families across the country, Midwest, East Coast.
They owned Cuba. They owned a country.
Gambling.
Kansas City was a big hub. Yeah, California.
Arkansas. Believe it or not, Arkansas.
Huh? Mm-hmm. Who was the big guy in New Orleans? Was that his initials are CM.
Traficante.
I thought Traficante was in
Florida?
Was in Florida, like Tampa. Carlos Marcello, maybe.
Carlos Marcello.
He was the big guy in.
Wait, Mick, I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
The very first instance of the mafia in America is New Orleans with the Black Hand.
Yeah.
Was the very first,
right.
and then from there, obviously you had the immigration and then when Prohibition took over, it would just, forget it. It amplified them in such ways, And I guess that when you were a police officer in the 80s and 90s, you then had to become a police officer during the drug wars.
Yeah, in fact, that was one of the first things we started learning about, to be careful about the drug cartels, and their trafficking and being, close to the freeways in Cleveland. Yeah, that was.
Well, you have Youngstown's a tough place of Ohio. People that don't know Ohio think Ohio like Columbus, nice area. I mean, there's some places in Ohio that are no joke, man. I mean, Youngstown, Akron, some places outside Cincinnati, Hamilton County, no bueno. Ohio's tough. Cleveland is,
Well, you have good and bad areas. There's great areas in Cleveland.
It reminds me very much of Jersey.
Yeah, I agree.
It reminds me very much of Jersey.
I said the same. So I had actually, when I fought CM Punk, I fought him in Cleveland, and all the fans I was meeting, it felt like I was meeting like Jersey people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like it was very. I found there to be a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, for the Jersey people listening, I said this before the show, and I'll say it again. Cleveland to me is like if Newark tried it all, and if Philadelphia just completely gave up. So like that's I have a fun time with it.
My people had a blast.
Love Columbus, Ohio. I love.
That's where
Columbus.
I spent most of my time in Ohio. But we would go up to
High
Cleveland
Street,
a lot.
Columbus. Columbus Funny Bone's my third favorite club in the whole country.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yo,
your boy
Matt Brown.
What?
Your boy Matt Brown's out there, yeah.
Yeah, in Columbus. I was saying anyway before.
What was that?
He was kind of steamrolling me a little bit. I was still trying to talk about Cleveland a little bit. So we had a great time in Cleveland. I don't know that I totally get the comparison that it's if Philadelphia gave up. Because I've seen some.
Have you spent a lot of time in Philly?
I've spent a good amount of time in Philly. I didn't think Philly was that much better.
Really?
Just the spots in Cleveland where I was at, it was like kind of beautiful.
Yeah, Cleveland's great.
I would have said
compared to Philly.
I would have said yeah.
Well, you and I disagree, friend.
Yeah, I might need to see some other spots in Philly.
Maybe.
The parts at least I was in was like, meh.
Depends on where you go. I mean, there's beautiful areas in all these cities, and there's bad areas too. It just depends on where you are.
There's no beautiful areas in D.C. Place sucks. There's no beautiful area. No, I'm messing with you. There's beautiful areas in all these cities.
Yeah, there's beautiful places everywhere. Yeah,
There's beautiful. There's beauty everywhere.
Pockets of good, pockets of bad everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Except for San Francisco, that place sucks. And what else?
Where else do you hate, G?
Houston.
Where else do you hate?
Houston could suck a dick.
Houston, huh?
Ugh, so overrated. So
Houston's
overrated.
Huge.
That's it. It's just like massive, sprawling suburbia with like a desolate downtown and oppressive heat. Right. Go to Houston. It's great.
What do you think? What do you think, Rick?
What was the temperature today here?
Yeah, right.
93, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be 84 in like the middle of the night.
Just be sweating.
I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it at all. I like the heat. Sometimes though, it's like it can definitely get a little oppressive. Like you walk out and you're like, oh my god.
It's a little and and the humidity.
I was gonna take a nice
why
walk
is it humid while it's raining? What's that about? That's wild. But we don't have the bugs in Cleveland. They get those those gnats that go up like 7 floors. That stuff's crazy. Remember that with Jabba Chamberlain when they had all the bugs all over him? Yeah. That happens like once every 5 years or something like that.
Midges, I think.
The midges.
Canadian soldiers, I think they call them.
Canada messing up. Canada just tried to kill us with their stinking timber.
Oh man, that was terrible.
Yeah.
Did you guys didn't get any of that, did you?
Not really. I didn't. Maybe some people noticed a little bit.
It was
an irritation in their throat and eyes.
It was bad in Jersey. We had both gone up to Jersey. It was terrible.
Are you a big fan of Machine Gun Kelly?
Not really.
No? How about Drew Carey?
Drew Carey. Love Drew Carey.
Drew Carey? Yeah. Wayne Brady?
Wayne Brady, yeah.
Sure. And there is all I know about Cleveland. That's it.
You got Stipe Miocic. One of the goats. One of the heavyweight goats.
Got Stipe. Firefighter.
Yeah.
Joe Table back in the day. Jose Mesa. The one of the best teams to never win the World Series, those mid-90s Cleveland Indians. What a squad they had. My God. Jim Tomei batting 7th. You had a middle of the lineup.
Tomei.
That was Roberto Alomar, Carlos Baerga, Albert Bell in all of his testosterone glory, and a young Manny Ramirez. Pitched to that lineup. Can you imagine how bad the Cleveland Indians pitching had to be to not win a World Series with that? Yeah, Charles Nagy as your number 1. Clean it up. Let's go. Anyway, so
you're talking to one of the few guys from Cleveland that's not a big sports fan.
Really? Yeah. Your entire economy was based on LeBron James for a decade. You don't like?
I watched baseball years ago when Buddy Bell, Andre Thornton, Rick Manning.
Wow.
Yeah. Who I can't remember the other names, but yeah, that was a long time ago. And then I felt like if you wanted to have an intelligent conversation about sports, you had to read the sports page every day to keep up, because then things started changing so often.
And there's just so much losing for so long. I mean, you got the Browns out there. You had. I mean, the
Did the
Cleveland
Browns change their like mascot or their emblem?
Oh, did they?
Yeah, I think they put a bulldog on that. You pull that up, Christian. You see that's.
Well, it's always been a bulldog, I thought.
Maybe they just got a new one though.
They got a new bulldog. Good for them. Yeah. I like Cleveland. I'm glad that we're doing this Cleveland tourism bit right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we could drive up some of the home prices, get a little like real estate action on this one. Mayor of
Speaking
Cleveland,
of Matt Brown,
hook
I
us
think
up.
Matt Brown's doing good in doing some real estate deals now. That's a
Really?
shout out to Columbus. Yeah.
I love it. So your family started. Your grandfather comes over. He's an immigrant. What made you want to get into police work? Was it what happened to your grandfather?
No, that really had nothing to do with it. I developed an interest after I was probably 12 years old, and I got for Christmas I got a police radio. Not a scanner, but a tunable radio, and we lived in Cleveland Heights, which was one of the bigger suburbs. So there was a little bit of action, police action, and that thing was on, like 16 hours a day, and it was interesting. And I think that pulled me in to hear all the different things that they do, and then I had a cousin join the Cleveland Heights police station, or police department, and that sort of locked it for me.
But you said that your family gave you pushback. It wasn't what they wanted you to do.
Well, my mother and father, yeah. Well, they didn't want their son to go into police work. That's understandable. But my plan was to get into police work, and I persevered. And then after playing drums with Sammy Davis Jr., I gave that up and
Speaking of which,
joined the police.
Your wife's gone. If there's any other stories you had left out from the memoir,
That wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It wouldn't be about old Christian over here.
You left performing to become a cop. My God, I feel like my mom and dad prayed for that every day for 10 years, that I would give this up to become a cop. I think that's what they wanted so bad. Oh, either a cop or a lawyer. That's what my dad wanted so badly.
My dad said to me that I also said, like, I guess your dad wanted you to be a lawyer. My dad said to me that he thought I'd make a great lawyer. I always kind of felt like that meant he thought I was an asshole.
I hope not. I hope that's not what he meant.
I don't know, but you know what I mean. Like if a parent's like, "Oh, you'd make a great lawyer," he must have been like a little bit of a pain in the ass in some degree.
It means you like to win, Mo. It means you like to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what a lawyer is. It's
like
a professionally trained winner at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know.
It's like an argumentative little shit. You'd be a good lawyer.
Yeah, no, that's a big problem our government's facing is 99% of them are lawyers. They don't care about what's right. They just want to win.
They just want to win.
They just want to win. So you are a police officer for how long now?
I was for 33 years.
33 years on the force.
4 years ago, I retired.
And you were writing these books obviously while you were on the force. That is how you do civil servant work right there.
No, not while I was
You're catching overtime. There's some traffic
Not while I
codes
was
that need to
on
be
duty,
put up,
yeah.
and you're chapter 6. Now you're doing this. When did you write To Kill the Irishman?
It was published in 1998, and it took me 4 years.
Well, that's very important to me because To Kill the Irishman was your second book.
Yes.
That means that you did 2 books, hard copy research, no internet, no Google.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doing the actual hard copy research. What was your process?
A lot of time at the libraries.
Great question.
With the microfilm of newspaper articles, sometimes magazine articles, and you'd be rolling through manually on a screen, looking at actual film, a strip of film on a spool, and some interviews. There are a few old timers that were still left,
That you personally interviewed?
Yeah, that I interviewed, and there was some paper left. The commander of the police academy, when I was in the academy, when he learned about what I was doing, he took me over to the coroner's office and introduced me to a friend of his who was like an office manager or administrator, and she told me how to make a request to get old records, like from the murders of the Porrello brothers and the Leonardo brothers, and then she made copies for me, and the file included detective reports and police reports too, so that was very valuable.
In the course of your research, did you uncover anything that was interesting to you? Like, did you see, being a police trained mind, did you see maybe there were some inconsistencies in the official story, or was there anything that stood out to you about, maybe something that was being done that shouldn't have been done? As you're going back over this, it's not just like you're a normal reporter.
I think the thing that stood out the most was almost all of these murders went unsolved.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Officially unsolved.
Now, why do you
You're
think that
speaking
is?
about in both books?
More so in the rise and fall of the Cleveland Mafia. In the early
Okay.
days, there were a lot of unsolved murders. My grandfather's murder is officially unsolved, but
Okay.
they had the police back then had their suspicions, and I have my suspicions.
Why do you think they went unsolved?
I think because back then there was a language issue with the people in the neighborhoods where the Italian immigrants were from. They were afraid to talk, and these killers back then they were very efficient. They'd just wait around the corner from someone, 2 or 3 of them, and boom, it's over just like that. They're gone.
Could bigotry have been a part of it? Is there something where it was like, oh, let the immigrants kill each other?
I don't think so. I think anytime there's murder, because this would happen later as the organized crime sort of became more organized, and the younger guys started treating, like you mentioned, Meyer Lansky. They started treating it more like a business because they knew that the murders attracted too much heat.
Bad for business.
Too much heat, bad for business, too much heat from law enforcement.
Was there an understanding when you were on the force of there were some guys that maybe they knew, alluding to what they saw, what we saw anyway in The Irishman, they knew who was doing what business, but as long as they kept it to themselves, they were not to be bothered?
No, and my involvement as a cop had nothing to do. I wasn't involved in organized crime. We had almost no organized crime cases at that time. This happened, as you asked before, like how old was I? Danny Green was killed in '77 ironically, coincidentally, in Lyndhurst, which was the town that I worked in. Out of all those suburbs, you've been to Cleveland, all those suburbs in Cuyahoga County. But I really had nothing to do professionally as a law enforcer with the organized crime. This project was all separate. All this research, all the interest in the
Yeah, we're not trying to like get you. We don't think like
that's actually the truth, though.
It's interesting that again in the movie, and you did say that there were some disparities between the book and the movie. There appeared to be, or at least the Val Kilmer character was like he knew what Shondor Burns was doing. He knew what John Nardi was doing. He knew what Danny Green was. Everybody knew, but as long as they kept it to themselves, there was like this kind of unwritten rule.
I feel like that's common in a lot of police versus crime practices. They know that these guys are doing it, but they have to prove it to.
Well, that's the thing, because I got to disagree. I think they would have put these guys in prison
if they could
any
right?
time that they could, but there were times that they were able to convict them. That Danny Green, in his case, he became an FBI informant, and he was considered a high-ranking.
And he did that almost immediately when he first got busted. When he became the head of the union,
of the Longshoremen's Union,
right?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So that's when he started his relationship with the FBI.
Yes, you've been doing your research, both you guys. I'm impressed.
Well, trying to show up. We got a best-selling author here. We got an intellectual. We got a chief of police and an intellectual powerhouse here.
And this stuff. I find this stuff very compelling. It's really interesting stuff. Too.
Oh, it makes for great stories. I mean, true crime is a big one, but this is a subgenre, you might say, of true crime, and it's a very popular one.
I think the craziest part of the whole story to me is who killed Danny Green. Was it Ray Ferrito?
Yes.
Ray Ferrito was one of the hit.
It brought him in from L.A.
Now, I've read different things. I read he killed 16 people. I read he killed 30 people. I read one thing that said he's suspected of as many as 60 murders.
Yeah, I don't believe any of that. I believe he was responsible for one, maybe 2 murders prior to Danny Green.
Really? Yeah. And now he's taking credit after the fact?
Well, these things get blown out of proportion. And somebody exaggerates a number, somebody writes about it without doing the research. But I never read anything that Ray Ferrito was responsible for that many.
And he turned state property almost immediately after that, correct?
Pretty much, yeah, because they made mistakes when Danny was murdered. When they used a remote control switch to blow up the bomb as Danny was coming back from his dental appointment.
Which we were saying, one of the worst ways to spend your last few hours.
I know.
You know, you go to
get him
like,
when he was
I'm going to the dentist. Like you could, you know what I mean? Of all the things to do in your last few hours,
Get him on the way in. You know?
Yeah,
exactly,
like
right?
come on, yeah, be a good guy. Get him on the way before. Yeah, he's sitting there with a toothache, going, man, I hate this toothache. I'd do anything to not have this. Man, the bombs too, man. What a way to go.
I'm sorry though. You were saying with the switch from the. You were saying with the switch, there was they fouled
the
up
control.
with the murder.
Well, with Ray Ferrito and Ronnie Carabia from the Youngstown area, important Cleveland organized crime figure in Youngstown. He's sort of was the overseer of the Cleveland mob's interests in Youngstown. They were in the getaway car, and one of them was driving, and the other one was in the back seat with the remote control switch. And that, I mean, when do you ever see something like that? There's a couple circumstances where you might, somebody under arrest in a police car, somebody in a cab or an Uber or whatever.
Yeah, back then it would have seemed very odd.
Yeah,
today it's all right. This guy's in an Uber.
And there was right. And there was a witness, young couple that saw this, and the girl was a sketch. She was an artist, and she made a sketch when she got home of the driver. I think the driver was Ray. She made a sketch of Ray Ferrito, gave it to her father, who happened to be a cop.
Jeez.
He turned it over to the Cleveland Police Intelligence Unit, and they recognized from the sketch that was Ray Ferrito from Erie, PA.
That's like watching the first 48. I don't know how true it is or not, but it's like it seems like 90% of police work is just dumb luck. Like it's like the first 48. Have you seen the first 48? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have on occasion. Yeah, that's an important number, to get moving with your investigation.
Yeah, something like
within the first 48 hours, you're most likely to solve a crime.
It's like an insane number. It's like 90% or something like that. If it's specific to violent crimes, but like the way that these guys get caught all the time, you're just like,
see
the
a lot of dumb shit.
Yeah.
Well, but also it's just like, you blew the guy up, and there was a witness. Oh, that sucks. And she's a sketch artist. Oh, what? And their dad's a cop. What the? Come on, this is insanity. Right. Come on, like you watch the first 48 and stuff like that all the time. It's like, I saw who did it. How'd you see him? Well, that dude owed me $25, and I was coming over to collect, and then I saw he killed the guy. So now I'm like, if he ain't gonna pay me, I'm just gonna tell you where he did it. It's like. What?
Yeah.
You could have been coming to collect at any other time and you saw him do it? That sucks. I mean, the guy probably deserves to get caught, though. I'm not like pro criminal here on most accounts, but it's
and there was a lot of investigation. It's a very wide ranging investigation. And one of the things that helped is the different levels of law enforcement, like the Lyndhurst Police Department, Cleveland Police Department, the FBI, the alcohol, tobacco, and
ATF,
firearms, the ATF, federal. They all worked together, created a strike force. I think they had at the state with the state charges, they had 2 county prosecutors assigned to the strike force, to the task force, and they worked jointly. And that was one of the first big cases, I think, in organized crime where all those different levels were not competing so much with each other.
Well, it's legit terrorism. You can't be having cars blowing up all over your city. Like
right.
That's,
there were a lot of bombs going off.
That's not
a lot
good.
of collateral damage.
That's not good for anybody. That's not good for business. It's like, hey, man, you want to open up a business in Cleveland? Sure do. Car blows up out in front. You know what?
Yeah, maybe not.
I think I'm good.
Might rethink that.
Yeah, I don't think Cleveland needs a dry cleaner.
So what led to Ferrito? After the bombing, they had fouled up a little bit. They got the sketch. Now did the Cleveland mob look to take him out?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, he's the one witness who can put all the other ones in jail. So let's just eliminate him. And when he found that out, according to what he said, that's when he decided to.
The Cleveland mob seems a bit reckless compared to other mobs. They seem a bit wild.
They were, for the longest time, they didn't have a whole lot going on as far as having enforcers that went out to do this kind of thing. Things were kept kind of quiet. for a few decades. There just wasn't a whole lot of conflict. So when this happened, they didn't have many capable enforcers that just could go out and just, wait around the corner from Danny Green, boom, boom, and he's gone. And so he was a tough opponent because of that circumstance.
And who were the Irish guys that Danny Green was surrounding himself with?
He had
There was Bill McWhorter.
He had those were fictitious.
Oh, they were fictitious.
Well, some
Okay.
of them were, and some of them weren't.
Okay.
And that's another issue, because you guys asked, like, what kind of problems do you have with the movie? I wish they would not have used the real names of characters if they were not going to portray them accurately. I think, generally speaking,
who's an example of that?
Keith Ritson.
Keith Ritson is a real guy or not?
He's a real guy. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was portrayed by
Vinnie Jones.
Vinnie Jones.
Bullet Tooth Tony.
And there were a few other ones. I think Tommy Sanito. So I wish they would have just created fictitious names. I think what they did is they looked to me for some of this research, who was gone and who was still here. And if the guy was gone, they would use the name. If he was still here, they'd create a fictitious name.
Okay. Interesting. Who made it out of those wars? Who is there anybody that made it out? Ferrito, we know. Ferrito made it out, and he was state property.
We talked about enforcers. There was a guy named Eugene Ciasulo. His nickname was the Animal. He was probably the most capable of the enforcers, and that's probably why he was targeted first. And he was almost killed with a bomb planted on his front porch, so he was taken out of commission. In fact, he came down to Florida to recuperate. So he made it out. Ferrito. There were a few other ones, but a lot of them wound up in prison. Next go around with federal indictments.
Now, how accurate was the movie into saying that the Danny Green bombings helped expedite the national RICO case? Because I worked on a project, I directed a project called Mafia States of America with Michael Franzese and Sammy Gravano, and they really pin it, the fall of the mafia, on two people, on Benino for writing the book, and then for Joe Colombo.
Benino.
Am I saying Benino correctly?
I'm not sure. Are you saying when you say writing the book, what do you mean?
Bonanno?
Bonanno, not Benino. I got to get my brain checked. I did this the other day with Machida.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on here. I got to get like some alpha brain or something going on here.
Yeah, there were books. There was the Velacci, Joe Velacci.
Joe Velacci,
the first one. Yeah, that brought the mafia name to the forefront. And made it a household term.
Yeah, what was the structure? We interviewed Rudy Giuliani, and he's looking at it going, oh, my God, all I got to do is fill in the blanks here. And you handed me a RICO case. Yeah. Like, you showed me exactly who's doing what. You actually literally connected the dots. Mm-hmm. So if I just fill in the blanks here, like, when he read it, he couldn't believe what he was reading. Yeah. He was like, I can't believe they actually wrote this. And that was Velacci, and it was Bonanno first, Velacci second. Velacci was the first guy, I think, that actually
the Velacci papers.
He actually was the first guy to admit that it existed on tape. Correct, Velacci?
I think he was deposed.
Yeah.
He did it in front of what do they call that? Where it's there's a bunch of guys up there asking
grand
questions.
Jury? Was it a grand jury?
It might be. I'm not sure.
Dude, I spent a year of my life.
Bobby Kennedy would do to people.
Yeah, congressional
committee.
Yeah,
right?
The subcommittee on
investigative committee. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he had a crazy thing where he thought, what's it? Shit. Now I'm doing it too. The guy in New York, who was his boss? Genovese, Vito Genovese. Mm-hmm. He thought Genovese, he saw him in prison, and for some reason he thought Genovese wanted him dead. Mm-hmm. Right? And then some guy came into his cell or something, and he thought this guy was there to kill him. Wasn't. Genovese didn't even want him dead, really, at this point, and he beats this dude to death, Velacci. Kills the guy. And then immediately after that, it's like, they're coming for me, and he turned witness.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think the argument about the influence of Cleveland...
Well, it's not just paranoid. Forgive me one second. This is one of the things Gravano said that the feds would do all the time, is they would leak false information.
Oh, they plant a seed?
Yeah, and they would say, hey, look, we shouldn't be telling you this, but we have it on good authority that,
Right.
And now, once that's in your head, good luck getting that out.
Good authority that you're a target, in other words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the influence of Cleveland in the demise is from the production of Angelo Leonardo coming out is at the time who was the acting boss of the Cleveland mob, flipping after a year or two in prison, federal racketeering charges, drugs and murder. He flips, and at the time he was the highest ranking mob boss ever. This was before Gravano. You just didn't really hear a whole lot about him because he didn't, he did what he had to do testifying. Testified in.
What was his name?
Angelo Leonardo.
Never heard of him.
Yeah. He was the son of, we talked about the sugar war, the four Leonardo brothers. He was the son of the mafia boss. He avenged his father's murder in 1929. I think he was 18 at the time. And that was his entry into the Cleveland mob. And then he eventually rose through the ranks. Yeah. But he flipped after a year or two in prison, and he was the highest ranking mobster to betray the Sicilian Code of Silence, Omerta.
Where, around what time was this? What time period was that?
85.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's like right before Gravano.
Interesting.
Maybe.
Yeah, Rico really changed the game, man. Once they started throwing 100 years at people, it was over.
Yeah.
Taking
their property, seizing personal property that was obtained with illegal money. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things Franzese said. It was like, you look at a guy and you say, look, you're going to do 10 years. And he's like, yeah, I'll knock it down to 7, whatever. I'll come out. I have my money. But now you're looking at consecutive life sentences. And it's like, okay, I think I'd like to have a conversation. I think, yeah.
Well, Leonardo was a key witness in the straw man trials. Have you heard of those? It was the story that's portrayed in the movie Casino. Sharon Stone.
The straw man trial?
No, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, the casino
movie,
skimming trials. Casino.
Oh, the skin. Yeah. Love the movie.
Yeah.
I'm aware of the skim. That was big, and that was where Kansas City had a big involvement.
Kansas City, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Chicago, and Las
of course,
Vegas. They're pulling out. They're basically stealing from the casino. So when that came down, they dubbed it the straw man trial, straw man 1, straw man 2. And Angelo Leonardo was a key prosecution witness. And then he testified in the big commission trial that came, maybe a couple years later, where the bosses of the New York mob families were put on trial.
Yeah, they just did a Netflix on that a few years ago. I think Franzese is in it as well.
Really?
Yeah. I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's on Netflix.
Fear City? Not Fear City.
Fear City. That's it.
Documentary.
Yeah. Fear City is what it's called.
Fear City was very good.
Yes,
it was very good.
Real good. Yes.
Yeah.
You need to take a break?
No.
All right, cool.
And then you mentioned the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Angelo testified before them and laid out the whole history of the mob, like from when his father came here, the bosses, the different families, and there's a whole file on testimony that they used to educate. He educated the senators and investigators on just the whole layout of the whole La Cosa Nostra from the earliest days.
How strong was the mob in Cleveland? In New York, there you couldn't get a garbage hauler without it being mob owned. There was the ports were mob owned. It's very famous that Roosevelt went to the mob during World War II and asked for help patrolling the
ports.
The ports, and when Rudy Giuliani helped get rid of the mob, he bragged that prices across the city went down 30% because there was they assumed 30% of all public services, the cost of all public services was being used as a kickback.
There was a time where I think they said $1 in $5 went to the mob
in New York. Yeah. And that, oddly enough, the infrastructure hasn't changed much. It just all goes to the government.
To the government now. Yeah.
they got rid of the middleman, but the little guy is still paying the vig, just not to the same people. Yeah. Was it the same way in Cleveland?
Well, you were asking about the position, like how powerful they were. And I think going back to the 20s and 30s, they say they were third in power after New York and Chicago. And part of that had to do, like I said, their place geographically between the two cities. Mm-hmm. And Cleveland even had a spot, Cleveland and Chicago had a spot on the commission, the newly created Mafia Commission in New York. So they were powerful, but as the years went by, I think their power dwindled, their influence dwindled a little bit. Still pretty powerful through the 60s.
What led to the waning of their power?
I think it's said that a big part of it is the fact that the longtime mafia boss was not inducting new membership. So the membership was aging, and pretty soon the guys were all 60 and 70, and then they had guys that were in their 30s.
Well, the demographics of the town changed, I would imagine. Cleveland turned out to be a very Eastern European town over time, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of Eastern European.
Yeah, I mean, you're not inducting guys named Miocic into La Cosa Nostra,
Well, you stopped having those if you were in the mob and you had a child and you had any sense, you had a son, you did not want him getting involved in that business. In some cases, these guys became attorneys. You're talking about attorneys. And in some of those cases, they would go on to defend their fathers or uncles maybe in these organized crime trials.
That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, especially you can see it from that position of like, yeah, my dad's wrong, but look at government does things wrong all the time, and sometimes these mob guys in the mob families really see government as bullies, really, that are, they do have that kind of romanticized Robin Hood aspect of, even like Sammy would say, I never hurt, I was a soldier in a war, I never hurt nobody that didn't have it coming. It's like, I wonder how everybody else living in the neighborhood felt. I didn't sign up to have this next door.
He was the greatest guy around.
He's the greatest guy around.
He was a good fella.
What about the murder? What murder? Oh man. What now? Last question on this. Then I want to get to your next book. There's more bodies out there. Did the Cleveland Mafia have its own families, or did they kick up to the same 5 families as everyone else?
They didn't kick up, but they were represented by, I think Mick mentioned, the Genovese family.
Yeah.
I think each of the other cities outside of New York were represented on the commission by a specific one of the 5 New York crime families. And for Cleveland, it was the Genovese family. I think at that time when this was happening, it was
interesting. So
Tony,
the commission,
Tony Salerno.
So Fat Tony Salerno ran the Cleveland Mafia as well.
Well, I wouldn't say he ran it. I think he represented Cleveland on the commission. He was portrayed, by the way, by Paul Sorvino.
That's right.
Yeah.
Paul Sorvino,
yeah.
Fantastic. Love Paul Sorvino. Love Mira Sorvino.
So if they wanted to make new members, like induct new members, you were asking about my grandfather. If they wanted to make new members, they had to get permission from New York. So in some respects, you're
interesting. It was like an affiliate in some ways.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. You have Cleveland Mafia very tied in, and then the next generation are becoming cops and lawyers, and it's fallen out. Now you have kind of the same underground was then taken over by gangs in the 80s then.
Yeah. Now you still had young people that wanted to be involved in this way of life, the mobsters, so there were still younger guys that were getting involved. It's just the law enforcement mechanism, local, state, and federal, especially you mentioned the anti-racketeer law, RICO. All these things were getting better. They were getting better. The federal prosecutors were getting better. The witness security program, the U.S. Marshals, they were getting better at protecting people. I mean, they were already good. I don't think they really lost anybody, but they proved that they could, even though a guy was being targeted by the mob, they showed they were able to protect someone if they decided to flip, go to work for the government, and they'd bring them into the witness protection or witness security, WITSEC, the WITSEC program. So all these things, but plus the culture was changing. The old culture where these guys looked up to their uncles and fathers as heroes, that was changing. So you didn't have as many street-educated guys that would be capable of doing that kind of work. But there were a few.
How did your father describe his father to you growing up?
Well, he didn't remember a whole lot about his father. He remembered a few scenes when he was killed. He was actually being watched by a friend of the family, down near where my grandfather was killed. And I think the guy took him, and he was 5 or 6 years old. My father took him to get, candy or something. And that's when the shooting happened. And my father remembers being carried as a 5-year-old kid with a guy that's running down the street saying, they shot Raymond, and up the steps to where he lived to let everybody know what had happened. He also remembered during the funeral, and this was tough for me even, during the wake, they'd have the wakes at the house, like in the living room. You know, they'd have the casket, and that's where they'd have the wake. And they'd have a kneeler. You know, you kneel down, say a prayer. He remembers standing on the kneeler, looking down at his dead father. You know.
Wow.
It's very powerful.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
While 15 people are eating a salami provolone sandwich at the repast in the room next door. Yeah, that's
Gabagool.
a little.
Obey.
Oh yeah, you know, hey, there's no reason to go hungry. He's not eating it. But that's and then you become a police officer. Did you ever have a conversation with your father about, you know, kind of living in between those worlds? And a big thing with some of those guys that I've talked to was, and whose family became prosecutors more than police officers, they still didn't want them going after their own. They still didn't want them prosecuting Italians. That was something that they were very, very strongly against.
Yeah, I believe it.
You know, is that, you know, you're one generation removed. Is that something?
He did not want me to write the book, the first book.
Really?
Cleveland, Rise and Fall of the Cleveland Mafia. He did not want me to write it, yeah.
Why is that?
He just didn't want me to dredge up something that had been, for the most part, lying dormant for, you know, several decades, you know.
Was he embarrassed, or was he afraid it would be painful?
He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't afraid. I think he may have been afraid for me, you know, getting involved and bring that out. But he just didn't want it dredged up. And there were also some of his first cousins that didn't like the idea either.
Did anybody reach out to you to stop while you were in the middle of writing it?
No. But when the book came out, and then eventually To Kill the Irishman came out, and then when the movie got made, these same cousins, I think there was a little bit of a sense of pride. Now this is maybe, you know, 10 or 15 years later. And plus the kids, the cousins in my generation, I think they were interested in learning about the whole story, because there were 4 brothers who were killed, you know, 4 out of 7, and they all, for the most part, had big families. So
that seems like a movie in and of itself.
Well, the rights, I now have the rights. They recently reverted back to me, and I'll be republishing the book in about a month.
Did you know you had a film when you were done with To Kill the Irishman?
No, that was not on the radar at all. Not until Tommy Reed contacted me just before the book went on the shelf. Young producer of Italian and Irish heritage, and he wanted to do something about that combined heritage. And somebody sent him a newspaper article about the book coming out, and that's when he got in touch with me.
Yeah.
Before we get in the third book, I got to make my push here. We need some audio versions of it. Now,
I know.
Now that you rehab the rights and stuff. Look,
you're right.
Everyone's got these on them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can be driving home from here, and I could be listening to a book, and I do often.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
sure.
think it'd be a great.
I know.
I'm missing
the boat on that.
Yeah.
Instead, we're going to listen to RFK on Rogan, but you know, it would be much better for Mick if we were listening to. There's more bodies out there. I can assure you that.
Oh yeah.
The Cleveland Mafia book is on audio. It is Audible, I think.
Oh yeah, that's
Amazon's
what I use,
Audible. Yeah, that's the only one.
All right.
And we'll put a link in the description. These are wherever these are sold. For anybody who wants it, go into the description of this video and they can pick up all 3 books. That'd be nice of you if you did. Maybe if you ask Christian nicely, he'll you can mail him here. Pay for the postage yourself, and we'll get them signed up for you.
I'm a big fan of like audio, because if I'm like watching a movie or if I'm reading a book, like that's all I'm doing. You know what I mean? I can be listening to a book. I could be brushing my teeth. I could be making food. I could be driving. I can do many things.
I don't know if you can tell this, but Mick likes doing cardio. He's a big fan of cardio. This guy. So like, you know.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Somebody has to be.
Someone has to do it, right?
Someone has to do it. Someone doesn't have to do it either. Now,
that's not what your doctor told you.
Fuck that quack. When you're optioning this off, now I'm interested in this because I've been in filmmaking and documentary making and commercials, and I've been on the production side for 10 years now. People have no idea how hard it is to make a movie. Yeah. They have no concept of when you think you're at the finish line of getting a movie made, you are at the one freaking yard line. How many starts and stops did you have to go through to make The Irishman?
The stars, and I don't mean the actors, the talent. I mean the stars have to align. Like a dozen stars have to align. It's very difficult. What was your question? I'm sorry.
So how many starts and stops did you go through? What was the process of getting this actually turned into a book?
It took 9 years from when the book was
9 years, a decade.
From when the book was optioned in 1998 to when the book was filmed in 2009.
What were some stars that were attached over the years that ended up dropping out or being replaced?
I really don't remember, but there were a lot. You know, I'd get a call. My agent Peter Miller who's now gone, but he would say, "Hey, they're presenting the script for the lead role, for the Danny Green role. They're presenting it to this actor." Sometimes I knew who it was. Sometimes I'd have to ask my wife, "Hey, who's this?" But then 2 months later, he'd say, "Yeah, he turned it down." And then a month later, I'd hear the same thing. They're presenting it to this guy, and this went on maybe for a couple of years.
You don't remember any names?
Not off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, but there were quite a few, and they were well-known actors. You know, they were well-known actors, and then finally got a call from my agent, said that it's been green-lighted. It's going forward. It's green-lit, and I didn't know at that point if it was going to be a made-for-TV movie or what. I had no idea who was going to be in it. He started rattling off some of the people, you know, Christopher Walken, Val Kilmer, Vincent D'Onofrio, Ray Stevenson, you know, and on and on. I was like, oh my gosh! You know?
Everybody else who was a character actor
you
for The
guys are
Sopranos.
close with, you're friends with Chaz Palminteri, right?
Yeah, Chaz is. Yeah.
I heard that Chaz wanted to be in the film, but couldn't do it because he had another project going. This was in 2009 when the economy, the national economy, I think it tanked, and there wasn't a whole lot going
2009,
on.
I think Chaz was just recovering from throat cancer. But I don't.
Well, maybe that was it. Yeah,
I could be wrong also. But the
Project in itself.
Yeah, Chaz is the man. Chaz is awesome. But like getting all those things together, then you get the director, you get the script, then you film it for a year and a half. Then it goes through a year and a half of post-production. Then you got marketing. It's like, man, it's almost like you're like, is this thing ever going to happen? And then you finally get to see your product on the big screen. What'd that feel like?
Yeah, I know. We were in Detroit, I think, for 4 or 5 days, and just a wonderful feeling to see these scenes adapted from, you know, a page in or a chapter in the book, and they're coming to life. You know. But again, there were a lot of bombs going off, you know. So,
yeah,
and they set that shot up. Set it up for 3 hours, and it's over in 30 seconds.
I bet that part of you is so happy, and then another part of you is like, "That's not the way I wrote it was fucking better." Like, why did they change that scene? That's not. What?
I think every.
She didn't look anything like that. She didn't look anything like that.
I think every author who has a book adapted for film goes through that.
Oh, Stephen
screenwriter.
King, Stephen King is like so vocal about how much. I mean, Stanley Kubrick is one of the greatest directors of all time. Stephen King hates The Shining with every fiber of his being.
Really?
He hated it with every fiber.
I'm a big fan of James Ellroy, the author. He's responsible for the Black Dahlia, L.A. Confidential, were a couple of that he hated L.A. Confidential.
I love that movie.
Gerard loves that movie.
But I never read the
book. Comparing it to the book, I didn't like it.
And you liked the Black Dahlia.
I did not like the Black Dahlia. Yeah, maybe because it was more like the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big. Everyone, it's such like a cliche. Like, the book was better, you know. So I guess that's another plug to go get.
Yeah, if you liked Kill the Irishman, you know? The book was better.
The book was better. Read it sight unseen. Yeah.
There were a couple of the mob soldiers that bought one in particular, Eugene Ciusillo. I got to be friendly with him, and he would buy 10 books, 20 books at a time.
Really?
He'd just have me send them to him, mail them to him. He lived outside of Pittsburgh at the time.
Well, he loved it. You wrote the history of his life, essentially, in many ways. I mean,
his picture was in the book, you know, and I think he may have signed books and gave away his gifts.
Listen, you know, the mafia genre on YouTube is so insane. It's a world that really doesn't exist anymore. It's in many ways, it's almost medieval. It's like when you think of knights or something like that, or you know, Robin Hood, and you know, it's it's just this world with camera phones and the panopticon surveillance. It just doesn't exist anymore, and it's a part of Americana.
It is. Yeah.
We don't exist as a country without that aspect, that kind of black market, and then having to overcome it as well. But I do feel the same way you do. It does get romanticized a bit.
Yes,
there was a lot of bad that happened there.
Yeah. You were just talking about the taxes in New York, how much it costs when you're talking about Rudy Giuliani. That's why I say it was a cancer in the areas that it may still exist, maybe New York, Chicago. It's just not. It's not a good thing when you're costing the little people.
Yeah. You're a bully
money.
at the end of the day, right? You're taking from people, and you may be less of a bully than the government in some aspects, but now the person just stuck there trying to live their everyday life has essentially two governments they got to kick up to. It's not fair to them. And speaking of not fair, the bodies. There's more bodies out there.
There is.
Tell us about there's more bodies out there.
I don't know we'll ever find more, but I wrote a book called Super Thief, which is actually in advanced development. May go into pre-production soon. I'm hoping, fingers crossed.
Only 8 more years, bud.
It's been probably that long. But in that book,
what a great title.
There's
Super
a character.
Thief? Super Thief?
She's super thief.
That's it.
Okay.
We're not going to break out into full song.
I was waiting.
If I knew the lyrics, maybe.
The main character that I wrote about, I worked with his wife at the time. She was a collaborator, Phil Christopher, involved in the biggest bank burglary at the time, 1972 in Laguna Niguel, Orange County, California. But he spoke of an associate by the name of Richard Henkel from Pittsburgh. And I mentioned him in the book, a couple of paragraphs, whatever, and it planted a seed about this guy. And so I was thinking about what's the next project going to be? Like, you always looking ahead, what can you get involved in if you're a writer or filmmaker, whatever. And so I started researching this guy, and he was basically a mobbed-up serial killer with a police officer partner on his crew.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Richard Henkel, Dick Henkel, from Pittsburgh, and
King Kong ain't got shit on me.
claimed up to 28 victims. The way I count of known victims and maybe suspected by the police, maybe.
That's a crazy yinzer right there, man.
Well, yeah.
That's a crazy yinzer. That's
the interesting thing, I think, is that he was still alive. He still is alive. And
he's still alive right now?
He's still alive. And about a year into my research, I thought, why don't I just try and contact the guy? He's probably not going to want to talk to me. Why don't I contact him? So I looked up where he was, what prison he was. I wrote to him and explained what I was doing. And he wrote me back pretty, like a month later. And he said he really was not interested. It was a very courteous letter, professional. He said he was not interested.
Good guy, serial killer.
I knew that was coming. He's going to take his secrets to the grave. Didn't want to talk about it. So I tried to leave the door open, having been a cop for 33 years and interviewed a lot of people. I asked him could I check back with him in maybe 8 months, a year, and I'll let him know how the book's going. He said, yes, that'll be fine. That's what I did, but I included some questions in it, and sure enough, I think that sparked his interest, and he thought maybe I had some things wrong, because I asked him later, and we corresponded for 10 months before I finished my research and wrote the book.
He thought I had some things wrong there. Another Jedi cop trick right there. We're like, yeah, so everybody said the girl that you murdered was a 5 at best. Okay, first of all,
not one of the questions.
10s only. let's what other fabrications are you doing over there? Fake news. Well, just let me write the book. How much did you end up getting out of him?
We didn't solve any. He got a little bugged at me as he felt I was pushing too hard, talking about some unsolved murders, trying to get him to tell me more. But I think I added depth to the story.
What was he afraid he was going to get time added on or something?
Well, he mentioned something like that, but he said even if he was convicted, it would be he'd be dead before he got the chair, because he was 83 at the time. He might be 85 years old now. But it added depth to the story, and It's a great story. The background is massage parlor prostitution in Pittsburgh. It's where some of the victims came from.
You sure you've never read any James Ellroy?
True story. This is a true story. And was hooked in with, you mentioned Youngstown, with a mob figure in Youngstown, a hitman by the name of Joey DeRose Jr. They were, I think, they were pals. Yeah.
But Hinkie was the cop.
Henkel was not the cop.
Henkel was not the cop.
No, he had a guy,
a cop partner,
a suburban Pittsburgh police department. A guy was on his crew, was never indicted for murder, but the investigators, and I was able to interview at length the original homicide investigator, and he said they believed that the cop was responsible for.
How did he end up getting caught?
How did Henkel get caught?
Yeah. He must have been at large for a very long time to be able to put in that much work.
It was a murder that occurred at the airport in Pittsburgh. It was a girl that was killed in a hotel room, and gory murder. Henkel probably did not commit the murder, but probably ordered the murder, and the motive was an insurance policy, a life insurance policy. And that's one of the ways that he made his money.
What, getting a piece of people's life insurance policies?
Yeah, he'd find girls, he'd warm up to them, and he'd basically deceive them. Let's fill this out for our mothers. We're going to be working together, a little insurance for them. I'll fill mine out, you fill yours out. But, by the way, leave the beneficiary line blank. And these girls, some of them were not the smartest. And
what time period was he active?
70s.
70s? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Crazy story.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's a Jack the Ripper type stuff, but it's like capitalist Jack the Ripper. That's crazy. It's like taking care of these prostitutes and then cashing in on. I can't believe a life insurance policy would pay off on murder. That seems like a conflict of interest, a gross incentive.
Yeah, I think they got a lot better at that, but one of them wasn't, because the investigator contacted the insurance company and said, wait, whoa, don't pay that yet, But he did get paid out on a murder that was committed. He wasn't nobody's charge. It's still a cold case, but he got paid out on her. It was his fiance, of all people.
What do you think about the criminal mind? What makes people that are willing to commit these kind of heinous? Do you think anybody is capable of doing this under the right circumstances?
I think they got something wrong upstairs. They got something that either is there,
crossed or
there that shouldn't be, or they don't have something that should be there. In their upbringing, a combination of things. I'm no psychologist in that regard, but I'm sure it has to do with the mind. The right and wrong. What's right? What are other people doing? Interesting character to be able to correspond and ask questions to. Serial killer.
Yeah. Now? There's more bodies out there. That was Super Thief.
No, that's Dick Henkel, and that's actually a quote. I know it's grammatically incorrect. It's been pointed out to me, and that's why I have it on the back cover. But it was a quote by him that he told as part of his plea bargain when he was convicted of the murder of the girl at the airport. He had to detail his involvement in 3 or 4 other murders, and he also had to agree to lead the police to 2 bodies. And they found one. He did make a try, but for the second one, but there was so much overgrowth because years had passed by. And when they were leaving the search area, he turned to the homicide investigator and he said, "There's more bodies out there." And the guy's like, "Well, who, Richard? Who is he?" He said, "I'm not going to say," because there was nothing more that they could give him. He was going to prison for life. He got out of the Pennsylvania's electric chair, so he wasn't going to give any more.
Wow, that's pretty incredible, man. Those are incredible stories. What attracts you to the genre?
I've been asked it. I've made a nice little sideline talking about this history.
The money.
It's over the years. Promoting the books.
How many books do you have?
5.
5.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 3 we have here: Super Thief, and what was the other one?
Bombs, Bullets, and Bribes. It's a Chandra Burns story.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You got some great titles, man.
Great stuff, yeah.
You got some great titles. That's bombs, bullets, and bribes. It's way better than Plato Plomo.
Yeah. A little, what's that called?
Alliteration.
Alliteration.
That's a little alliteration.
No.
That's a matriculation of alliteration,
a little
my guy.
alliteration. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what are your thoughts on Chandra Burns?
Most notorious Jewish racketeer in Cleveland. One of you mentioned Meyer Lansky. I don't think the comparison is there, other than they were racketeers, they were Jewish. Chandra was more of a street guy, because I've been asked, how come he didn't get involved with the Jewish racketeers who invested in casinos and left Cleveland, wound up investing in Las Vegas. I think he wanted to be the big fish in a little pond, so he sort of he was an overseer of the numbers racket, which was mostly black racketeers. The illegal lottery that preceded the state lotteries in a lot of cities. It even continued in some cases after the state legal lotteries came out. And he was a financier. If one of their numbers hit hard and they had to have a big payout, well, they had to borrow money to stay in business, and they would borrow money from him. He was connected into mobsters in Miami. Jaime Martin, I think, was one of them. They were pals.
In the movie, I felt like they kind of glossed over the way Danny Green and Chandra Burns were like very close, and then they went to get the money for him to open his restaurant.
Yes.
Chandra sent for the money, sent a courier. The courier got busted, and then Chandra was like telling Danny, "You're responsible to pay back the money." Danny was kind of like, "F you." And it seemed like a very very quickly. Now they're trying to kill. He went right from there. All right, now kill this guy. Like quick, it seemed like
quite
quick
developed enough. Maybe.
I thought it was a very quick flip. Was there more to that story?
There probably was a longer period of time that things started heating up, but that's basically it. They blamed each other for the loss of whatever it was, $75,000, and they started going after each other. This was Danny Green.
But Danny it seemed like he was like they were very close.
I think they were. Danny went to work after he left the Longshoremen's Association. He got involved as sort of an enforcer and a driver for Chandra Burns and a couple of the other Italian mob figures like Frank Brancato. And so he was really a mafia associate is what he was.
Green?
Yeah, Green. Yeah, Danny. And so they were close at one time, but then when that happened, there was, I don't know the exact details, obviously, but there was a lot of bad blood that developed, and they were blaming each other, and then one went after the other one, and that was unheard of. Chandra Burns was huge. He was an ally of the old Mayfield Road mob. He was very respected. He was, he was allied with. He was not really part of the Cleveland Mafia, but he was a close ally.
What'd you think of Christopher Walken's portrayal of him?
I thought it was great. I think it was more like he said it would be in an interview. It was more Christopher Walken than it was Chandra Burns. I think he said he was surprised to learn that Chandra Burns was an actual character, a real person. But
if you had to cast the movie over, and it's a great movie, it's phenomenal. But if you were in the head of casting,
you can't ask me that.
I have to.
Well, you can ask me, but I don't have the answer because I don't know the talent.
What I'll do is I'm going to write you a letter in 8 months. Maybe you'll change your mind.
Let me do the research.
How many attempted hits did Danny Green overcome and not succumb to?
How many did he survive?
How many did he survive?
It's probably a half dozen. I'd have to go through, but probably a half dozen. Yeah, they tried to blow him up when he and John Nardi, I think, were leaving the Cleveland Hopkins Airport.
So the radio sort of fuzzed and he hopped out of the car.
They shot. Well, that was another time. Yeah. Now, whether or not that actually happened, or whether Danny staged that, is a bit of a question in real life.
Really?
Did he stage that to try and make it look like somebody was after him in his earlier years?
There's something where he had dynamite thrown in his car?
Yeah, that's the claim, and that it went into the car, and he picked it up, and he tried to throw it out the window, but throw it out the passenger window, but it hit the frame of the window, bounced back in. He jumped out, and it went off just as he was jumping out. It hurt his ear and had some other...
Was Mike Fratto a real character?
Mike Fratto, yeah.
Fratto?
Yeah, he sure was, yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Mike
Steve Sharippa, Bobby Bacala.
Yeah, I love Steve Sharippa.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yes.
A very likable character. Sad, that one hurt. It was sad that had to go that way. But it made it not as bad, the fact that Fredo went after him. You know what I mean? He tried to talk nicely to him to get him out of the deal, and then he went right after him.
He claimed self-defense and was he wasn't indicted. He had a successful self-defense.
That's considered one of the attempted hits.
Not real. Well, it could be. Yeah, it could be. But they shot at him. One of the mob enforcers, it might have been one of Shonda Burns' guys, shot at Danny with a long rifle and missed. And the story is that Danny whipped out a little .38 and started running at the guy.
Running at him.
Shooting, and the guy took off from where he
got in the car. And then Danny throws the gun. And I was like, man, that guy should really flip around now. Go finish off the job.
I don't know how true that part is. Yeah.
No, it was just in the movie.
Right.
Was
Danny Green as much of a badass as he was portrayed in the movie?
I think he
was he a legitimate tough guy?
I think he was, yeah. And you either, back then, from what I understand, you either hated him or you loved him. The Italians hated him and the people in his community, and Collinwood, not Collingwood, there's no G, as is portrayed in the movie, but in Collinwood, he was sort of, for many people, sort of a folk hero. Like you said, Mick, a Robin Hood character who, helped people in the community, gave away turkeys during the holidays to the less fortunate.
Point of clarity on Robin Hood. Robin Hood never stole from the rich and gave to the poor. He stole from the government and gave the money back to the people. Just throwing it out there. Just point of clarity.
What's your point, though?
Huh?
What's the point? You're saying are you saying that you like him even more for that?
Robin Hood?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But now it's been co-opted to be like he's stealing from rich people and giving to the poor people. No, he's stealing from the tax man and giving the tax dollars back to the hardworking people.
So you love that?
Yeah, because taxation's theft.
Yeah.
Become ungovernable.
It said Jesse James was like compared to Robin Hood, but then they were saying that wasn't so much. He wasn't so much like that. Like he was more just like a.
Jesse James and his band, more or less, wouldn't let go of the loss from the Confederacy.
Right.
A lot of what they did was just like, oh yeah, you want this country? Well, I ain't playing by your rules. Yeah.
They'd rob a stagecoach and be like, you all are getting the privilege of being robbed by the great Jesse James.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine those guys back then would have to announce who they were.
The balls,
Yeah. It's like, I'm George Nelson.
Look at me. George Nelson,
look at
stealing TV.
Wow. Hey, George Nelson, we heard you stole TVs. No, that's a damn lie. I would never do such a thing. I'll tell you what, man. I don't know.
That's my favorite scene in Role Models.
Can you believe it?
He's with the lawyer.
I think you should take the deal.
Yeah, he's like, you should take this. He's like, look at me, George. Was it George Nelson?
Yeah, might have been.
Yeah, this guy. He's talking to the lawyer, and the lawyer's like, he's like, I did not do this. Absolutely not. I didn't do this. He's like, well, they have you on film. They play the film. He's like, look at me, George Nelson, stealing TVs. That's fake.
Who do you think, Rick, is the dumbest criminal you can? We've talked about a lot of good criminals, romantic criminal. Who do you think is the dumbest criminal you ran across in all your years here?
I got nothing at the moment. I'd have to think about that. But there is a lot of dumb criminals out there, and that's probably why I'd have to think so hard about that. Yeah.
Somebody out here incriminating.
Not all criminal masterminds.
Not all criminal masterminds.
Just dirtbags.
Just let it ride. Yeah. Just get it. So what do you got next? What's coming up next?
So I'm working on a memoir about my time with Sammy Davis Jr. 2.5 years and growing up in a musical family, everything that led up to that point, and then the time on the road with him.
How has your writing style changed over the years?
I like to think that being a cop improved the way I interviewed people and wrote, and the way I worked on books and interviewed people over there made me a better police interviewer. So, but as far as improvement, definite improvement over the years. Learning tricks from not tricks, but the editors, working with editors, house editors or editors that I hired when I self-publish, and basically trying to self-educate by what they do, because they've got a unique eye to see these things, how to word something better, how to cut fat, as they say, and make it leaner and stronger. Less is more. You probably heard that, and so I think after 3 or 4 books, the writing was getting better.
having a book option, having two books option now, has that changed the way that you structure your work to make it more palatable?
It does, but prior to that, I think it changes the way I think about taking on a project too. Because now all I think about is, could this book become a film? Could it be adapted for a film?
You ever going to take a shot at fiction? Or like James Ellroy, where you do that.
Mixes a little bit of both.
Yeah, what do they call that? They call that there's a term for it. Dan Brown is faction. There's a direct There's a direct literary term for it. Chris, if you look it up, Dan Brown is the guy who does it better than anybody else. James Ellroy as well, but there's an actual term.
James Ellroy is my favorite.
Where Dan Brown obviously has made a career off of taking 5 facts and putting one fictional thing in there and making,
is it historical fiction?
Is it? No, I got to look it up. But have you, I'm taking 7 minutes to ask this question, forgive me. Have you thought about perhaps taking on a fictionalized novel?
Yes. I've talked to my wife about that. Someday I'd like to write a novel, but it's a different thing to be able to, it's a great skill that the good ones have to be able to create believable characters and believable settings and a believable plot line, so that when you're reading it, it looks like, and it reads like, it sounds like this could really be happening.
Well, just do the George R.R. Martin. George R.R. Martin says all you do is you take history, you stretch it, add a fresh coat of paint, put a couple exclamation points on it, and boom, you got fiction.
Sounds easy, huh?
That's how he makes it. He makes it seem pretty easy. That's because I mean, look at what he did with Game of Thrones. I mean, that's just.
I have a difficult time writing. Sometimes it's drudgery.
Well, I mean, he's also taken 40 years to write 4 books, so he's maybe the wrong guy to. I mean, his books are 7,000 pages, but you familiar with George R.R. Martin?
I'm not.
Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones,
sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the War of the Roses, but he did it with imagine the War of the Roses with dragons, and fucking hot blondes and stuff, and heavy metal and zombies. Yeah, that's the War of the Roses. Hell yeah, And I'm gonna make Jon Snow exactly like me.
What do you mean?
Have you ever seen a picture of a young George R.R. Martin?
No.
Can we pull that up real quick? Look up young Jon Snow and George R.R. Martin. And this is apparently the final straw. So his he got kicked out of his own writing room on Game of Thrones, and the D&D took it over in the last two seasons. And they started going off canon.
The D&D?
Yeah, David the 2 executive producers, Demioff and I forget the other, Davidoff and Demioff or whatever.
I didn't know if that was
that's who everybody
term.
That's who everybody blames for Game of Thrones going completely off the rails in the last 2 seasons. And part of it was they got sick of Jon Snow being the hero, and they wanted it, because of the time and everything like that. Right. They wanted Arya, the female, to kill the Night King, and he's like, no, Jon Snow kills the Night King. Jon Snow kills the Night King. Spoiler alert.
You never saw it?
There you go.
Oh, wait, that's not him on the right.
That's Kit Harington on the right, and that's a young George R.R. Martin on the left. So.
All right. I don't know. I'm not seeing it so much.
You're not seeing it so much?
Not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much. Did you watch it, Christian? Game of Thrones? What'd you think?
It was all right. Last season kind of sucked.
Last season absolutely sucked.
Last 2 probably seasons.
Yeah. It was this. Yeah. The best thing is there's this meme. There's this perfectly drawn horse. Right, it's you see all its muscles,
3/4 done.
Ripples. It's all the ripples of the muscles and its mane and all that stuff, and then the last leg is just a stick figure.
Yeah,
that's Game of Thrones. It was very well done, and then really shit the bed at the end.
If you have one of your movies optioned again, how would you go about the negotiation to make sure that your creative project is your vision differently in any way, or do you not care? Or
I don't know if I'd really realistically be able to exert that kind of leverage, but if I did, I would make sure that they don't use, as I was saying before, the names of real characters, except for maybe the lead the lead person. That was a little bit of an issue for me. There were some people that were pissed. calling me at the office at the police station, and saying my relative he wasn't shot in the head, he died in prison, things like that.
Interesting.
So that's
They're
one
getting
thing
mad at you for that?
Yeah, because I wrote the book, and they kind of assumed that I had complete control over the whole thing, and I have to tell them
you had to
I did not
explain to
write the
them.
screenplay.
Yeah, they took their own liberties with it. You had to let them know.
Yeah. So I
pain in the
understand
ass.
that that's how it works.
Yes and no. Sometimes I don't understand that at all. Like Mickey Ward in the the fighter, he loses to guys he beat. He fights guys he never fought in the movie, and it makes no sense.
Yeah?
Yeah, it makes it's positive. It makes no sense. I have no idea why they did it that way. Some of these decisions you just don't know. Sometimes I think there's like crunches, and they're just like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, the second act's dragging. Let's just figure this thing out. And let's just, let's just wrap her up here. And that's, so next thing you know, this thing becomes that thing. It makes no sense. But from a movie perspective, for somebody that never watched, for somebody that never read LA Confidential, I loved it because I have no idea. I'm ignorant to what I'm missing. I have no idea.
Missing a lot, bud.
I love Kill the Irishman because I have no idea. Although I did a little bit, they were very close to giving Danny Green the Al Ruddy treatment.
Oh, they gave him
very
the
close.
Al Ruddy rub?
Yeah, like when he takes the necklace off and gives it to the kid, I'm like, all right, kill this fucking guy.
You don't want to be like me, kid.
Yeah, hey, you don't want to be like me, kid. Here you go. Like he's fucking Mean Joe Green giving a jersey or something. Like, get out of here. Get out of here. Don't tell me that really happened seconds before he got blown up.
That did not happen.
Okay. Yeah, because if that happened.
I get asked that question a lot, though. Did that really happen? No, that did not happen.
Hey, are you the Irishman? Yeah, kid. You want an autograph? Anyway, I gotta go die now. I can't
Run
stand
along,
that.
kid. Make sure you get far away from the blast.
Yeah, get out of here. Get out of here, go home and kiss your mother, kid. I'm Danny Green. I'm a good guy. Remember that before I die right now. Can't stand it. Can't stand it. Dude, this has been incredible, man. I really, really appreciate your time, Mister. And more than anything else, what's it like being interviewed while your son is behind the engineer booth?
And what do you think about his
Is that
veganism?
the hot seat? Yeah, let's talk about that.
That could be a little bit of a problem. Sometimes when we're eating together, I have to basically tell him to just shut the hell up.
Yeah.
So
I'm eating the lamb, I'm eating the chicken, I'm eating the beef.
Some lamb, some beef, some chicken. Yeah. So when he goes home, what do you got to pick up a whole bunch of avocados and stuff for the kid?
We do. Actually, we do buy a lot. I think my wife buys like 3 dozen avocados every week,
It took 100 years. It took 100 years of genetics to go from a Tommy gun wielding gangster to an avocado eating vegan. Like if you don't believe the pussification of America is real, I don't know what to tell you. Like this is. I mean, how dare you? I mean, this is like this is how the wolf became a poodle in 4 generations right here.
Talking about that hair again.
Oh man, cannot thank you enough for taking some time while you're with us. This was incredible, man. You're the very first writer that we've had on, and this was great, man. Really, can't thank you enough. Hope we
Hey, when you finish your memoir, come back on.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
absolutely.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Rick Porrello, that is Mickey Gall, that is Christian Porrello behind there. I'm Gerard Michaels. This has been Gas Digital. We will see you guys next week. Peace.